this actually makes me very happy because, as you know, I publicly disassociated myself before
Mm-hmm.
they could announce it. And what was nice or what was surprising was seeing how many of my friends, old friends or whatever, ended up being PMO and using my post to out themselves
Mm-hmm.
entirely. There was at least 6 people that commented on my post saying, we're here for you or we stand by you. And these were people that had faded. And so this was their way of like coming out to their family. And that was really surprising because, one, they were people that I had no idea that they had actually left. And two, they were not the people I thought would have left.
Right.
And like you said, like you thought that some of your friends might be PMO. And I thought the same thing. And the friends that I thought would be PMO were just more like POMI.
Mm-hmm.
So, lots of guilt tied up in their belief.
Totally.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. And this is as good a time as any to start the interview, I think.
Yeah.
Dax the Scholar.
Hi.
Thanks for being on the channel.
Thank you for inviting me.
For a lot of reasons, I've like enjoyed talking to you, but you also you had this like really crazy speed run through getting this fellowship.
Speed run to apostasy.
Yes, yeah. It was apostasy done quick 2022.
Yeah, I won.
You won.
I won.
You did.
Yeah.
You're number 1 world rankings.
I am number 1 and now have to pay extra for therapy, but I won. And that's what matters.
You lose some money, but you win.
But I won.
Clout, yeah, absolutely. How long between, we'll get into the backstory of all this, but like how long was it between you posting a letter disassociating and getting this fellowship?
2 days. Not even 2 days. I posted on Facebook on Monday, and by Wednesday they announced it.
That's pretty legit.
Yeah, 2 days. Fastest turnaround ever.
Yeah. And this was how long ago?
Last week.
Okay, yeah. So the speed run kind of continues.
Yeah. Because I woke up 2 months less than 2 months ago. Let me see. About 2.5 months ago.
Yeah. That's pretty quick. So 3.5 months ago, you were attending all the meetings and going out in service?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was not, because meetings made me uncomfortable, and I was kind of questioning, kind of not questioning, but with the realization that I was kind of resigned to my fate and that I would re-indoctrinate like I had done in the past. And that is where I was at when I woke up. So thankfully I was caught at a low and not at a spiritual high.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So I had, I would log into the meetings, but I wouldn't attend them because a lot of times the talks had more of a focus on the governing body and obedience than what I felt like they used to be, which was more about Jesus biblical principles about being kind to one another and long suffering and fruitage of the spirit type stuff, because I'm still a sucker for the fruitage of the spirit, whatever. Sure. I don't care that I don't actually believe that the Bible is factually based. I still am a sucker for a lot of the lessons that the Bible teaches. I will take those with me to my grave. But as the tone shifted, it became harder and harder and harder to pay attention. And then I had some traumatic stuff happen right before the pandemic. So going into the pandemic, Zoom meetings were not easy for me. And so most of the time I was either crocheting blankets or playing video games or, just logging on and pretending.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's lay the track to that point then, because that's, it's obviously a journey to get to that space where you're even ready to consider looking at information, or let alone posting a letter saying I'm definitely leaving.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start the interview by doing what I always mean to do and always forget to do, which was I'm going to ask you first, what did you like about being a Jehovah's Witness when you were
what did I like about being a Jehovah's Witness? Absolutely nothing.
Really?
Absolutely nothing, because I've always had more of a social justice warrior activist heart. And although the Bible was telling me, the story of the Good Samaritan and treating people fairly and all that that's not what the witnesses were telling me. And so even though when I would do my personal Bible study and I would talk to friends about like, hey, we should try to get together and do this thing for the community, not just for witnesses, but like for the community. And they were all like, well, Jehovah's going to fix it all in the end. And that would drive me insane. And so I can't even say that they were the ones that bred that into me, because actively witnesses would discourage me from some of the ideals that I had. So no, I don't think, the one thing that I really enjoyed was that I knew that whatever country I was in, I could find somebody that I could connect to on some level. I always knew that like I could go anywhere in the world and find a congregation and be able to have some sort of support that way, right? So if I'm ever going to another country and I'm nervous because I haven't been there, I know that I can just go to the congregation. That is the one thing I will miss, is knowing, and maybe this is just naive, but knowing without a shadow of a doubt that you are receiving support from somebody always.
Yeah.
And pretty unconditional support. The condition is you're a witness. And so as a witness, like that's a pretty large, strong, like a pretty big strength for the organization. I don't think it outweighs everything else. I think that people need to be able to connect with people of all cultures. But knowing like there was a sense of security with that.
Yeah.
That is one thing that I miss. What do you miss?
Good question. Nobody's ever asked me a question before. Not true at all. I think I missed, I was going to kind of say the same thing, in that I miss having like a certainty and like a context with which to like view everything. Like every conflict that I would see on the news made sense in some larger theme. Like I could always say, well, that's because we're in the last days and because this is Satan's system of things. And even though bad things would happen, it could also be like an encouraging way of thinking that, well, that just means that the system's going to end soon and we'll be in paradise. Like I miss having a framework with which to view everything that made everything make sense, instead of what real life is like, which is uncertainty.
It's funny that you say that though, because for me, whenever I saw bad stuff happening and people doing evil things, what tripped me up was I felt like, well, if Jehovah created all people and all people have the potential to draw close to Jehovah, this is really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I never viewed it from the perspective, because I'm so in the moment all the time that I'm not a future thinker at all. And so it would drive me insane that our belief that it would be fixed by Jehovah outweighed our compassion and understanding. And so for me, when there were like conflicts, like this thing going on in Ukraine, like it's actually heartbreaking for me now being on the other side of it and not being a witness, understanding that people can just be evil. Mm-hmm. Because before I really did believe in the goodness of people, that anybody, because there's so many examples in the Bible of people that like would curse Jehovah and whatever, and then end up becoming a worshiper of him. I was like, clearly anyone can change. And now I have to come to terms with the fact that that might not be the case, because if we're not being led by a creator that wants us to act a certain way, then some people just are evil.
Yeah.
By nature. And that's not a fun thing to come to terms with, especially because I'm kind of a, for lack of a better term, a humanist. I believe in the goodness of people. I don't have a religion, but I really do believe that people try their best. And so it's funny because the thing that made you feel encouraged was actually something that highly discouraged me all the time.
Yeah. Well,
like
so
always.
Which one of us is right? Which one of us wins then? If we disagree, I don't understand how we can resolve this.
I think you win because you actually followed the doctrine, and, doing what I did and following Jesus's principles.
Damn, that was a backdoor brag at the end.
No, because
you were a true Christian among true Christians.
No. I followed Jesus's principles because I didn't want to do my daily Bible reading or study. Like I was lazy and I didn't really want to know about our doctrine. I was like, as long as I'm following the principle of it, it's fine. I was lazy. So your answer is the more correct answer.
Well, now it's funny that you say that, because I felt the same way, in that I always was more interested in the principle of the thing. And I didn't like thinking about the specifics of the doctrine, because that's when I would get tripped up. So yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know what I liked. And that's kind of a thing that I wrestle with. Is I know that I enjoyed things about it, but when I think about it now, I'm like, did I just enjoy having friends and being able to talk to my family? Because I don't know.
Yeah. But also remember, you have to put it into context that you're going to enjoy things based off of what you like at the time and what you like now and what you appreciate now, and what your moral values are currently are not the same as they were as a witness. And although you gradually, clearly changed into who you are now, regardless of belief, there are going to be moments where you were maybe not on a spiritual high, but maybe super indoctrinated, where, maybe get-togethers were just like your jam, or maybe, certain aspects of the organization were really encouraging for you. And I think that's okay. I think it's important to acknowledge that you could have had positive experiences in the organization while being super brainwashed. That doesn't make it a negative experience.
Yeah, no, that's why I brought it up, actually, is because I find that now I feel so much happier than I did. But happiness is kind of like it can only depend on like how happiness is defined for you, and like you're defined of what it means to be a happy Christian and to live the happiest possible life. So you're kind of setting limits on your own happiness in a way, but at the same time, I definitely knew there were moments where I enjoyed it. And like you said, I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. And that's something that when I first searched and like watched an interview with an XJW for the first time, hearing them talk about positive things made me feel like, okay, well, this isn't just some bitter haterade, because they enjoyed stuff about being a witness.
Yeah. And something that I didn't really think about until you said that just now was, my family was super, not all of my family, but my mother was super abusive. And my dad was always working. And so he didn't really know much of it. And I was a kid. And so I didn't know to tell him any of it, because to me it was normal. And there were people in the hall that knew and did nothing. And then there were people in the hall that knew and did everything in their power to try to get us out of the house, because I'm an identical triplet. And so a lot of times people would view it as kind of burdensome to have us over. We weren't hyper and we weren't ill-mannered or anything, but you assume 3 kids, it's going to be a handful. So there were people in the hall, my spiritual mom, Audrey, and I will always consider her to be, I'm not going to cry. I will always consider her to be my mom. One second.
Yeah.
Her response to me leaving was still loving, as compared to my mom, who was like, you need to repent and all this different stuff. No, Audrey went out of her way to make sure that I knew she still loved me. And, I'm going to miss people like that. She's also the person who, when I was probably 12, 13, and things were getting really bad between my mom and my family and everything, she made sure to always get me out of the house, and she made me feel special. And a lot of people didn't. And you have to understand, I'm an identical triplet, but I took on a lot of the abuse from my mother. She's a narcissist. And so she picked me as her scapegoat for no reason. I don't know why. And so, Audrey could tell, and Audrey decided to take me under her wing, and she didn't like make me go out in service or anything. She was just like, she'd say, oh, I'm going to pick up Danielle for service. And then we'd go do other stuff. She lied to my mom to protect me, to like help me get out, to help me escape. And then even when I was an adult, just was always super supportive. And so, although a lot of that stuff had a lot of like Jehovah's Witness, a lot of the context was surrounding Jehovah's Witness culture. I miss the experiences like that, because although witnesses are very conditional about their love, or really conditional about how they show love, and I want to reassure that to anybody that's watching or listening, that if your parents aren't talking to you and you're being shunned by people that you loved your entire life, it's not that they don't love you, it's that the way they show love is conditional. And that doesn't mean you have to be okay with that, but just take comfort in that, because I know that although Audrey will shun me, she didn't leave with like a bitter tone. She didn't leave saying, shame on you, or that, Satan got another one or something like that. No, she just said, I love you. And, just that those are the kinds of things I'm going to miss, is people like that, people who were in the religion because they cared about people, and not because they were raised in it, and not because they were super huge doctrine followers, just people who took advantage of it to help take care of other people. And that's what she did. And so, if I'm going to miss anything, it's her.
Yeah.
Because, I don't have a worldly mom yet. I'll find one. But for now, motherless, fatherless child.
Oh, no.
I know.
We're both in the market for parents. If anybody
yes,
wants
if anyone would like to volunteer, my allowance should be $500 a week, please. Thank you.
Yes. We'll be running, of course, a contest on the channel to see who, gets to be our parents.
Yes.
No, well, thank you for sharing that. And I can tell you're a content creator, Dax, because you effortlessly transitioned into your childhood. And this is my new character I'm going to adopt, as like NPR Jake for the show. Like,
there you go. Yes.
Our guest today is Danielle of Dax the Scholar, and we're just getting into her childhood here, a new activist on the scene. So
yes, thank you so much for having me on the show. No, I can't do NPR voice. I'm sorry.
No, that was great.
Brooklyn.
You already have it, so it's great. You just have to start ending everything like a question, because they kind of do that.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's get into the childhood thing. So were you born into the religion?
No. So I was, yes and no. My mother was disfellowshipped after, getting on with the inky pinky with my dad. And he and her got married. They both had separate kids that they brought into the relationship that were the same age, 2 boys, my older brothers. And they were married for a little while before they had us. We were kind of an accident. They weren't trying for us. We were not on purpose, but they say we weren't an accident either. And around the age of like when we were 2 years old, my older brother ran away from home, and we had moved up to Washington State. And at the time before that, we had lived in California, and we moved away because my dad was driving in military during the LA riots. And he was like, we got to get out of here. I'm done. And so we move upstate we move up to Washington, and my brother Greg runs away and joins MS-13, which, if you don't know, is a very big drug cartel. And he's 16, and he ends up smuggling 80 pounds of marijuana across the border, gets caught, gets thrown in prison. And my dad goes, I don't want these girls raised worldly. And my dad's Catholic. He's not a witness. He was like, I don't care that it's a cult. I want them to be protected. And encouraged my mom to start taking us to meetings. So she did. She was disfellowshipped at the time. The hall was super sweet. They would without a word, just like help take care of us. And she was reinstated probably around the time we were 4 or 5. So basically raised in it, but my dad wasn't a witness. And after my mom was reinstated, she became inactive. And so it was very much like in and out. But in the periods that we weren't going to meeting, because she was abusive, and she wasn't putting us in school, so we had to hide. So she wouldn't let us outside of the house. So the only times we would get to socialize is at the Kingdom Hall. And so when she was inactive, it was actually really hard because we were very alone.
So you said she didn't send you guys to school.
Yeah. So one of the things that my dad's fear of us becoming like my brother, one of the ways it manifested was he decided that we shouldn't go to public school because my brothers were always in and out of like detentionary schools where they like take your shoes and lock all the windows. And which I don't know if those exist anymore, but they did in the 90s.
Say, that sounds unethical a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. So he decided he wanted us to be homeschooled, but my mom did not want to homeschool us. So she didn't.
That's it.
Yeah. She just didn't. and she didn't enroll us in school at all, even though in the state of Washington, legally, you are required to enroll your child in, if you're going to homeschool them, you're still required to enroll them with the superintendent of the school district that you're in.
Okay.
But I've actually reached out to the to the state government about this. No one's going to check. There's no way to check that they enrolled, whether or not you enrolled your kid in school. And if you've never enrolled them in school, there's not really a good way to track them. So we just kind of flew under the radar.
So I mean, like some parents I've known of to pull their kids out of school to homeschool them as witnesses for spiritual reasons, because we have the best education program and they'll be able to pioneer as youngsters. But it doesn't sound like that was the motivation so much for your mom.
There was no motivation for her. It was just she just waited too long and then got nervous because she realized that after a certain age, I think it was like 8, she could face legal trouble. And then after that age, she could face us being taken away by CPS. And so she wouldn't let people into the house. She hardly let us outside of the house. We were instructed kind of like to lie. She'd say, if anybody asks, you're in this grade and you're learning this. And then because, she couldn't hide us forever. So sometimes she had to take us to the store with her or whatever. And, you see 3 identical kids walking around, you're going to come up and talk to them and ask them the stereotypical question you ask kids. Oh, what grade are you in? And so she was very, very, very scared of getting caught. And I think she just at some point realized that she was in too deep and there was nothing she could do about it. So she just kept us out of school.
Man, it's just awful. I mean, I don't know what to say to that other than that's just about one of the worst things I've ever heard. It's terrible.
It's just, she is a very, I used to very much forgive her for this. And now I view her as a very selfish individual.
Yeah, that seems like a fair call.
Yeah, she can blame it on my dad all she wants, but the truth of the matter is he was working from 7 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, coming home, cooking dinner for everybody and going to bed. So, and without us telling him, there was no way he was going to know.
Yeah.
So
the witness life gives you some structure. Did it give you like some hope as well? Did it give you some kind of framework?
It did. And what it did for me was I really, really strongly believed that Jehovah existed, even though I didn't really feel it in my heart. But to me, I was like, there's no other way I'm getting out of this situation. So he better fine.
He
better freaking exist. And so that's kind of what got me through my childhood, was banking on the fact that Jehovah would help me out of that situation.
That's kind of interesting, though, the sense like you didn't feel it in your heart, really, but like it was almost like an intellectual thing. Yeah,
I just kind of figured that that if I couldn't feel it in my heart, that was on me. And that I must have been doing something wrong and I should just, work harder at it.
At one point in your life, are you able to break out of that situation that you were in at home?
So we eventually, we met this witness family who was going to a homeschool partnership program where it was 4 classes a week. And the parent of that family convinced my mom to enroll us. And so she allowed us to take classes that she knew we could pass. So things like history, English, art, no math, because we did not know any math. There were certain subjects that we were just not allowed to take, which was frustrating because we needed those classes. And then around the age of 16, so I went there until I was 16, just 2 days a week, 4 classes a day. And I didn't really learn that much. The teachers were great, but there was nothing going on at home. And what she was supposed to do was supplement it with classes at home. But instead of that, she just made up transcripts. And so we moved to Pennsylvania and she said, we'll figure out schooling. And I knew what that meant. I knew that meant that she intended to do nothing. So I told her that I wanted to go to the public school, even though that was terrifying for me as a 16-year-old going to public school for the first time. And she said no. And I said, I will call CPS because I finally learned what they were. They are not an organization that takes bad kids away. They are an organization that is supposed to be about child welfare. So she drove me down to the public school and I enrolled, and I went to my sisters eventually enrolled after me. They finally worked up the courage like a few weeks later. And because it's scary if you've never been to school before and you've never really interacted with children your age because you were locked in your house all the time, it's really scary.
Yeah, I would say so.
And it was a terrible high school with really stereotypical bullies and cliques and everything. It's kind of comical, actually. But we graduated, and as soon as I graduated, I moved back to Washington State from Pennsylvania. I had talked to my dad about it. I told him that I don't think I could live with them anymore, considering how my mom was treating me. He agreed. And so I had $1,000 and I moved.
Wow.
One suitcase and $1,000.
Hey, good for you. Yeah. I'm glad you got out of that situation. I mean, so I'm like, that is really crazy, like going to public school for the first time at such a late stage. And where were you at with your education? Like, where did you pick up reading and writing?
So thankfully, my mom would take us to a thrift store every few weeks or so, and we were allowed to spend $1 each. And at that thrift store, they had nickel books. So like books for just $1. And so we would buy as many books as we could, and like different books. So that way we could all read, that's a bunch of, anyways. So we loved reading because we were poor. So there was nothing else to do. It's not like we had video games at home, and we didn't have cable for a long time. So your options for TV were like PBS and the news, and that was it. So we spent most of our time alone in our separate rooms reading. And because of that, and because we loved to read, that made school really easy because our reading comprehension was already great. And so when it came to studying things like history, it was just a matter of just reading the material and picking it up. But with math, I failed math in high school. All my math classes. I was put in pre-algebra and then algebra 1, and I failed both of them and had to take like extra. I had to go in for like 2 hours early every morning to make up the course. And I really didn't learn it because I didn't have any basic math skills. I knew basic arithmetic, as in like I could add numbers together, but I didn't know my times tables. I didn't know how to do long division. I didn't know how to convert fractions into decimals. I didn't know how to calculate percentages, nothing like that. And so I was at a very big disadvantage going into high school and having a lot of classes that expected you to have that base information. So although I graduated with a 2.7, which is shameful, my sisters both graduated with 4.0s. They did really, really well. They helped each other with math. I had ADHD. I couldn't sit still long enough to do it. Mm-hmm. But I'm in college now, and now I've maintained a 4.0, including with all my complicated math courses. But
wow,
yeah, that was so basically what got us through and what got us in education was the fact that we liked to read, and we bullied each other into reading. We were like, well, I'm smarter than you, so you better catch up. And like, we're very competitive with each other, and would tell each other that this is terrible. Like, you're embarrassing. And so we learned. Yeah.
Positive peer pressure, we called it.
Yeah. Sorry if that was a lengthy answer, but
no, that's a perfect answer. Okay, so you move in with your dad. Does the organization like become a bigger part of your life when you're more independent and like free of that environment with your mom?
Yes, actually. As soon as I moved out, so I move away from my parents and I'm on my own, and I decide that I'm going to auxiliary pioneer. So I was working from 8:00 in the morning till noon. I was making $800 a month. So that way I could auxiliary pioneer. And it was horrible because I didn't have a car. I didn't have a driver's license. I was taking the bus everywhere. It was horrible. But I did draw closer to Jehovah. I did get more involved in the organization because I just figured that, that was my chance, that maybe like without my mom leeching away all my mental energy, this would be a good time to draw closer to Jehovah. It didn't work, but I did do it. So,
well, I was going to ask, like what are you feeling when you're doing that? Like when you're pioneering, what kind of satisfaction are you getting? Like, do you feel more spiritual? Do you feel like more fulfilled?
no, I felt very much worse. I felt anxious. I felt depressed. I didn't like what I was preaching. I didn't like the people. No, I didn't like the people I was pioneering with because I thought that they were being dishonest because they would lie about their time. I didn't like knocking on doors. I didn't like the peer pressure that was involved with auxiliary pioneering, the way that people expect you as a pioneer, auxiliary or not, to kind of be the backbone for other people's field service. Even though I never had a Bible study, I hardly ever had return visits, and they'd always turn to me, oh, let's do your return visits. And I'm like, I know that I'm out a lot, but that doesn't mean I've got jack shit.
Yeah.
And so no, I hated it. It made me feel way worse.
That was my experience pioneering. I didn't even make it my full first year. I didn't even go to pioneer school. Like I got like 8 months in. They're like, do you want to just stick it out and go to pioneer school? And I was like, I don't feel worthy. I can't do it. Because I had a similar feeling where I just was like, I am not cut out for this. I just don't feel it. I thought I did. And I had that thing of being turned to like, okay, what are your return visits? And being like, how do people have all these return visits?
Where are they getting these from? Are they just like, oh, the person looked out the window, so they were a return visit now? Like, I don't understand.
Are they just reading way more into conversations than I am? And like things that I'm like, okay, clearly not interested. They're like, that was great, and I'm going to call back on that person.
Yes, I think that's exactly what's happening. Because
they're willing return visits into existence.
Well, and I was very honest when I'd go door to door. I would knock and I'd say, hi, I'm offering a free home Bible study. If you would like one, let me know. If you don't, that's okay. Just let me know and I won't come back. But I don't want to waste your time and I don't want you to waste my time.
Wow.
And they would be honest with me, which was, I don't really want one, but thank you for being honest. And I'd say, okay, have a nice day.
That's the direct approach, I believe they called it. I started doing that more too, because I realized that would end the conversation a lot faster. And I'd be like, I'm not in the mood to talk today, so I'm just going to I'm just going to offer Bible studies. That'll shut them up.
Well, because then you don't have to do that weird, like, pretend thing where you're just like trying to manipulate them into a Bible study, because that never sat right with me. That always felt really weird, but you're like trying to trick them into letting you come back. Ugh, it's gross.
Well, that was something that really bothered me too. I just living all this validation of my experience, and that's the most important part of interviews to me, is for to ultimately make it about me and make sure that I am.
No. The point of interviews is to highlight an experience that validates other people's experience. So you're right.
This is validating.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable.
Validate you 100%.
Thank you. This is great. I had a real issue presenting the magazines, particularly The Awake, because I'm like, why are we trying to trick people into thinking that we're presenting a lifestyle magazine about stress, when in reality, we want them to study the Bible. So I never presented those. I loved the tracts because they were very simple.
What was your go-to tract?
Oh, it was the what happened? Like, what is your view of the future? I think. Oh, I liked that one.
Mine was let's see if I can remember what it was called. It was the brown one. It was like a full size.
Oh wait, no. Yes, that one.
It had like 5 points on it, talking about some of the
truth tract.
The truth tract. That's what I placed, and
that was my thing.
And I would present a part of it, and then I'd say, next time when I come back, we can go over one of these other 5 points.
Yeah.
And I did not have another presentation besides the Bible study one. I never placed a magazine. It was just that. It was, here, would you like to talk about any of these points? And they'd go, no, thanks, but I'll keep the tract.
Well, I think that's good to hear, though. Like, speaking of validating other people's experiences, actually with a capital K, most people do have trouble starting Bible studies. Of course, it's incredibly difficult to start a Bible study.
You're the only one.
You think you're the only one. But I watched that Knowing Better video that you and your husband, so he knows, yes, I heard his recommendations as well. The Knowing Better's video on Jehovah's Witnesses is great. And one of the things that he did that actually blew my mind was breaking down the math into how many hours it would actually take the average witness to bring somebody into the religion and how many hours go into converting just one person.
It takes well over 7,000 hours of ministry work to get one baptism. It would take a regular pioneer working 70 hours a month over 8 years to get a single person. Most witnesses never get anybody at all.
But that was like, oh, okay. Yeah, the odds were not in my favor.
Yeah. And it's validating to hear because a lot of witness culture is just posturing. And so
yes.
If you don't know that, which I didn't because I was ignorant and naive and not allowed outside of the house, you just think that you're a piece of shit.
You just think you're failing.
You just think you're failing. You think you're a piece of shit and you're failing and Jehovah hates you because you're stupid. And that's so dumb.
You did a really good interview on your channel with somebody who was one of the anointed, considered herself one of the anointed, and received that same thing as somebody who was anointed. Surely you have even more angels, patting you on the back when you're at the door. So why don't you have more Bible studies? And it does seem like even though there's an innate understanding that this is in some way unappealing and it's just hard to get people to listen when the random stranger knocks at your door.
Yeah, it's a small crowd, remember?
Right. It still is ultimately your fault a little bit because why aren't you adapting your presentations and trying different things?
Yeah. And it was actually really nice to hear from Mara about, this sounds terrible. It was nice to hear that she struggled.
Yeah.
But really, because I know she was talking about how people in the hall perceived her as being one of the anointed. But for me, because my uncle is one of the anointed and he's my favorite uncle. Sorry, Jim. I always viewed the anointed in a positive light because I had only had positive interactions with those who were anointed. And so I figured they have no issue at the door. They're inspired of God. They've got no problems when it comes to being spiritual. And so it was very exciting for me to interview her because she got to, she answered all the questions I've wanted to ask. Did she struggle in the ministry? And she did. And she was never good in the ministry ever. And being anointed did not change that. And we know now, especially after that interview with Mara, that being one of the anointed really is just confirmation bias, but it's still very, very fascinating to see how that, knowing the power of the brain and how strong confirmation bias can be and how it can trick you into doing things that you would not normally be able to do. The fact that still wasn't strong enough to overcome her lack of being able to get Bible studies.
I guess I'm wondering at this point, as somebody who's had a pretty awful experience being raised as a witness, although the witness aspect of it was not what was terrible, and not really connecting with the ministry part of it. What's keeping you in at this point?
It's funny that you ask that because you would think that considering my family, that I had to fight to be a member of my family, that wouldn't keep me in it either. But I think that is part of what kept me in it. That and the fact that although I talk a lot about how much I can't stand the headship arrangement because I think it's demeaning and I think it's wrong. The head of my household that I picked was pretty damn good. He never, ever, ever exercised the headship arrangement in that sense. He was never ever clearly
you have to submit to my headship.
Yeah, what I'm saying. Yeah. He involved me in every decision and always went with what I said. If what I was saying made sense, he was like, yeah, okay. And he never had weird respect things. Where if I made decisions on my own, he was never like, oh, that's terrible. And he never, I don't know. He always was very empowering of me. He wanted me to go have a job. He wanted me to go to school. He wanted me to talk about my opinions and to other men and kind of fight the patriarchy a little bit. He's a terrible head and terrible. And even then, we still had issues. So I think what really kept me in was just, I didn't know anything else. I didn't have a bunch of worldly friends. I wasn't very close to my quote unquote worldly family. And I figured that it wasn't hurting anybody. I figured that the organization, even if I don't believe in all the policies, isn't damaging. And so I was willing to stay in.
Yeah.
Until I learned otherwise.
Yeah, no, that makes sense though. Because for most people, religion is a slightly more casual part of their life. It's something that just enhances their life, gives it a little bit of structure, gives them friends to hang out with, and it doesn't need to be more than that. So that like, seems like a pretty healthy view of religion.
But that's kind of a problematic for witnesses though, because you can't be a casual witness, especially if you're baptized. You can't be a casual witness and have friends.
Right.
Because if you're a casual witness, that means you still believe in the faith, which means you're probably not going to have a bunch of worldly friends, but you're bad association, so witnesses won't hang out with you. So you pretend.
Was there anything around this time, like, you obviously are like, kind of a feminist just already, just innately, it seems like. And it seems like you just kind of had that sense of like social justice and stuff. Yeah. I'm the same way, obviously. So just always been based as hell. Always had good takes my entire life. But that's interesting to me, because I remember in all seriousness, like feeling like, well, that's just equality for everybody. So of course I'm a feminist. Why would I have a problem with that? And we're like, nobody.
Were you one of those people that were like, well, if brothers are practicing the headship arrangement properly?
Yeah. Like the real way to do it is, equality. And it didn't necessarily feel like a conflict of interest, but I also like had a hard time understanding why we didn't have women that like gave public talks and stuff. Are you thinking about that stuff?
Yeah, that permeated my mind for, I don't know if that's the correct term, but that really like stuck with me from a young age. It always bothered me. And I mean, it deeply bothered me to the point where I would get really worked up and really upset anytime a talk was about women and like woman's role in the Christian congregation. I was like, this isn't a role. This is servitude. And it always pissed me off. Even when I was full on believing, I thought that it was a mistake. I thought that this is just the organization taking Paul's letter to the congregation in Corinth way too far and being very Pharisaic. And I can't wait till Jehovah corrects these bitches. Like that's how I felt. Yeah. And because I felt that way, that like strongly influenced my actions and my conversations. Whenever I didn't let Watchtower culture really dictate how I acted, which was a problem because a lot of men didn't like that. And my poor husband actually got the brunt of that because people were always like pulling him aside privately and saying, control your wife and all sorts of nasty stuff, which to him was really hard because he was like, she's not doing anything wrong. So control your manners.
I meant to ask, like, at what point do you get married? Like, how old are you when you get married?
I was 19 when I got married, which was way too young. And I didn't want to get married, but I liked the guy that I was dating and I didn't want to lose him. And I didn't think he would wait for 3 more years. So I was like, well, if I'm dating them, the witness thing, if I'm already dating them, I might as well marry them.
Right.
And I picked him because he wasn't oppressive and because he was my friend first before we ever started dating. So that was really hard because I was having a lot of positive experiences till this point in the organization. And then so when I started to doubt things, and at the time when our marriage was really good, the things I would have doubts about were things like relating to LGBTQ opinions or some of the governing body announcements were getting strange because this was back in 2014. And when things really started to, get nightmarish. And
that's kind of when the broadcasting and stuff started.
Yeah. So up until that point, it was really just some things that I didn't really like. I didn't like the headship arrangement, but I solved that for myself. The problem is I don't only care about myself. So the thing that would test my faith all the time was hearing from other women's experiences or little experiences of my own where brothers in the congregation would try to exercise headship over me, which they can't. They're not my head. And, what kept me going was I was like, well, Jehovah will fix it, which is like the most insulting thing you can say now. Like, Jehovah will fix it. It's just so rude.
Yeah. What bothers you about that now, hearing it with a different perspective?
What bothers me about it is that whether or not Jehovah will fix it ultimately in the end doesn't mean that people cannot do temporary fixes to help those who are currently suffering. You don't say, well, Jehovah will resurrect that person when they're sick and you could do something to prevent them from dying. I mean, outside of blood transfusions, right? Like,
Right.
Like if your kid is dehydrated, you're not going to go, well, Jehovah will fix it. No, you're going to give the kid water. Like, and so that never sat right with me, except for things that I felt like really, we couldn't do anything to control, like how the organization views women, which is bullshit because it's 65% women. So I don't know why I thought that way.
Wait, wasn't that said like in drama, like with the What is True Love thing, where they're like, most of the people in the organization are women, so you got to lock down a good brother while you can.
No, but I have heard, or I don't know about that, but I do know that they've given talks talking about how, women are a great army who are doing the majority of the preaching work. And I don't like, it's. Yeah.
We salute their free labor.
Yeah.
And absolutely no say over how they're treated.
Yes, no, it's not free. They're being provided for by their loving husbands in the congregation. And so clearly they just need to be grateful and mild and respectful and need to shut the hell up. So,
It sounds like you did have a good relationship like with your husband, and you guys are like doing well in the congregation. It seems like by witness standards. Yeah. Are you considered to be like a good example, like exemplary?
I think I'm mostly just kind of skirted on the outside because I kind of like Mara, I didn't have a lot of friends, and a lot of people knew my mom growing up, and she was very manipulative and very mean, or very backstabby and gossipy. And so a lot of people probably figured that I'd be the same way. So they would steer clear because I went back to the Kingdom Hall that I grew up in. So no, we weren't in bad spiritual standing. In fact, my husband is quite popular. That's why I had over 500, or at one point had over 500 friends on Facebook that were all witnesses, because we traveled a lot. And so we weren't exemplary, but we were like popular in a sense. Like a lot of people knew us. But like we weren't unexemplary. Like we weren't bad association either.
Right.
We were just kind of middle ground.
Yeah.
Unproblematic.
Good.
Yeah.
That's the best kind of person you can be,
yeah,
in my opinion. Okay, so that makes sense. And so you have a pretty good marriage. And like one of the things that is stated outright is basically like the witnesses have the key to family happiness. They have the key to happiness in general, but particularly family happiness, right? So like
we had a good friendship. We didn't really have a good marriage.
Interesting.
We do now, but our marriage was really, really awful because we came from very different backgrounds. And if you follow witness marriage advice, you're probably divorced, but just don't follow it.
What is it? What specifically?
Witness marriage advice is based off of stereotypical gender roles and assumptions that, men aren't very, don't really care about emotions and just want to fix problems. And women, they might need to be listened to more. And my husband and I were very opposite on that. He is very emotional, and he does sometimes just want to talk about a problem and doesn't want me to offer a solution. And I'm very much solution oriented and kind of not mean, but cold, because I grew up in a very cold family. And witness advice is, consider your spouse and their shortcomings because of their stereotypical gender roles. And also husbands, respect your wives for all the house cleaning that they do. And then wives, don't try to surpass your husband by showing others that you're actually smarter or stronger or more competent. No, give him respect by lowering yourself into a position of submissiveness. And we know that this is a burden and it's harder for you, but doesn't that make you a better person? Like, they gaslight you into thinking that being all those traits is because it's such a burden. Jehovah knows that burden that you're taking on and will somehow like make up for it someday. And it's bullshit.
So does this add a sense of like, I don't know, guilt to the proceedings because like you feel like I'm a good Christian, we're doing things right, but like we are having these problems, or even yourself, like I'm not connecting with the ministry in this way. Like, does that manifest itself with guilty feelings?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to touch on this briefly, but I don't want to get too dark. So, sure. But I'm going to start with the startling thing. The way that our relationship got into very non-consensual intimate activity territory was because we kept relying on Jehovah to fix the fact that we were incompatible affectionate wise. I'm not saying intimacy wise. I'm saying like he oftentimes needed more physical contact than I did, both sexual and non-sexual. And I was physically anxious because most of the physical contact I got as a kid was like you were getting hit. And so I really didn't like to be touched. And that was a problem. Because that was the start, any intimacy issues after that, we both, as a partnership, blamed on me, which led to us getting into these situations where he would be really coercive, and I felt guilty because I knew it was my fault. And because I told him it's my fault, and we really were sticking to that narrative, he also thought it was my fault and was like, I just need to push her into it and she'll be fine. And so that got worse and worse and worse over the course of several years. And then it got really bad. And after that really bad incident, things had to change. And that was where we really, after going to a marriage counselor, realized that Watchtower marriage advice is not the key to a happy family. Praying is not going to fix your issues. Communicating more is not going to fix your issues if you don't know how to communicate. And I don't mean knowing how in the sense of sitting down together and talking. I mean understanding all the terrible, weird psychology that's going into the things that you're saying and who's actually dictating the conversation, because it wasn't him and it wasn't me. It was Watchtower doctrine that was basically masking this really bad sexual assault problem. And so, it was kind of like waking up. It feels the same way as when you wake up from being a Jehovah's Witness, when you realize you're like, oh, that's all really bad.
Realizing that something happened to you that you didn't necessarily classify in a certain way before.
Or realizing that that it's kind of hard to describe, but because it's difficult in a marriage, and marital rape is unfortunately super common, especially in religious communities, and very hard to talk about, because since it's very common, that means a lot of men are guilty of it, whether they want to be or not. And it's very hard to come forward about something like that. And yet it's important that you do, because otherwise other men won't come forward and change. So yeah, it's very much like waking up and realizing that the organization isn't the truth. In the same way, I woke up and realized this is not normal. It's the same as if you grew up in an abusive family and you suddenly realize after you move out and you've been with other families, you're like, oh no, like you don't know until you're exposed to something else, or things get worse. And so unfortunately, a lot of witness women are stuck in these relationships where they're blaming themselves for being raped.
The way that Watchtower operates is like men write the publications and disseminate the publications, and men are in the positions of authority to counsel other men and women. So at no point are you ever really getting a woman's perspective other than the CEO's wife said something and provided her perspective on this matter. And
even then, that perspective is influenced by what these men who determine what the Watchtower doctrine is, it's affected by that narrative.
Yeah, their entire perspective of what is acceptable and what isn't has also been like handcrafted by this patriarchal structure that they're a part of.
And remember, woman can also contribute to the patriarchy and to misogyny. Women can be misogynist. I've known many female misogynists. They are common.
If you're an XJW, you probably know a lot of them, actually.
Yeah. And even just, quote unquote worldly people. It's common. And so, waking up from that and realizing that is very, very difficult. And that almost knocked me out of the religion. But don't worry, they brought me back.
Well, good. Well, how'd they do that?
Yeah. So we went to the elders, and they heard us out. If you can win him over without a word, and then also read me a scripture about being a submissive wife and respectful, and how that would influence whether or not he was physically abusive. Here's the problem. We were going because he felt guilty because he was like, oh, I recognize that this is a problem. We need to go to the elders. We go to the elders. He's like, I did these horrible things. They said, not a big deal. But not to me. They said that to him privately. I found that out 3 months ago. So they just kind of, to me, said, we're here for you. Maybe not something you want to share with anybody else. Don't want to bring reproach upon Jehovah's name. But you're always willing to, you can always talk to us. But these are like 3 old men who I don't know because I just moved halls. And they were not very sympathetic. And I said, well, do I have grounds for divorce? They said no. And I didn't really want a divorce, but I wanted to know if that's an option, because that's going to help me, heal a little bit, to know that I'm not stuck. Instead, I was stuck. We stayed together for 9 more months, and then we separated for 6 months after that. But they kept me in because I went from hating God to them, calling me and telling me, this isn't something Jehovah did to you. Jehovah ultimately will take away this pain that you're dealing with. And it was very painful. Just like, I just, I was not doing well mentally or emotionally for a while. And so that was very convincing to me. And I realized that if there are other women in this situation, only Jehovah can fix it. Because I knew from my experience that a lot of women wouldn't ever come forward to elders or authorities. And a lot of women probably don't even know they're being abused and just suffering the effects of abuse without understanding that it's not their fault. And so, I didn't know all that really, or no, I did know all that at the time. And so that really influenced me staying in, because I was like, well, only Jehovah can fix this. And, but I still had a hard time going to meetings. So, and then COVID happened.
So you mentioned like going to marriage counseling. At what point did that happen? Like after
right
the separation
away.
or?
No, right away.
Okay.
Because I was suddenly terrified, because I realized that I had let this go on while blaming myself. So I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust him. I didn't want him in the same room as me. I didn't want him anywhere near me, because I was like, I don't trust you, and I don't trust me, and I don't trust you not to manipulate me, because how could this have happened? And because he's my best friend, he still is. And so we signed up for marriage counseling, and the marriage counselor right away said, well, after all this, why are you guys together? And we said, because of our religion. And he said, no, that's not a reason. You're either choosing to be together or you're not. But if you're forced together, then you're not together. You're either choosing to be in the relationship or you're not. And I responded positively to that, because I was like, well, right now I'm considering divorce. So yeah, I would love to feel like this is my choice. My husband was not feeling that way, because he was suddenly panicking. He suddenly panicked because he wants a family and he doesn't want to feel abandoned. And I was not very kind. I said, well, you should have thought about that before, shouldn't you have? And I was very rude. Deservedly so. It's fine. He got over it.
It's fine.
It's fine. So we went to marriage counseling for a while, and it was kind of helping. And then we separated. And that was the biggest thing that helped, was having that space where we would meet each other once a week, go to marriage counseling, and that was it. And that was extremely helpful, just getting that space to think and breathe and, consider my options and also find myself again, because I had suppressed a lot of my personality to try to fit the Jehovah's Witness wife ideal. And so, kind of taking back the narrative was really helpful, but not with my faith.
Now, like, there's still quite a stigma against counseling and therapy, and especially in marriage counseling within the religion. So, was that a hard decision, or did you?
No. No, not at all. I said marriage counseling, or immediately I will divorce you.
What made you okay with that? Just like, you just never really bought into the organization's like stigma towards those things, or you never developed that stigma?
I never developed that stigma because I knew that mental, my family, I don't know if depression's hereditary, but my family all struggles with depression, like severe depression. And so I didn't really buy into the, psychology's evil thing, because I saw how much my family was always suffering, and I didn't want to be the same way. So I had already sought out private counseling for myself to deal with some childhood trauma, and it had been beneficial. But really, we just needed a third neutral party that wasn't religious to facilitate conversations between us, so that way we could talk about our relationship outside of the organization. And to a lot of witnesses, that's really dangerous, because when it's no longer the threefold cord and you rely on Jehovah for everything, suddenly you're following your own standards for how a marriage should look, because it really is up to the individual couple. It's not up to anybody else to decide what your relationship looks like. And witnesses have a really hard time when a relationship does get negative, reconciling that fact, because they're taught to just rely on Jehovah. But no, he was a little bit apprehensive. I was not at all.
Yeah, because I mean, the the culture is, even when things get bad, and even if you do get married too young and realize you don't have anything in common, and this was a huge mistake, I think it happened to you, but it happened to a lot of my friends, but you could always come back to Jehovah if you marry in the Lord, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
that's the one thing you both can go back to.
That's right. You can always go back to that. And, like, for my experience has been, now that me and my wife don't share a religion, like, being forced to examine your marriage without that safety net is really interesting. It really forces you to examine why you love each other, what you actually want, what matters.
It really highlights the choice of it. The fact that you are choosing actively to be in a relationship with somebody through thick and thin. And I think that's way more meaningful than the Jehovah's Witness connected at the hip for life because God says so type of relationship.
I'm really glad you said that. That really, that gives me something to think about. I don't think I had thought about how it makes it less special in a way when you are kind of, I know as a man in the organization, the way it is kind of portrayed to you is it's like the nice guy thing that you hear guys say online, like the fallacy of, well, I'm doing everything right. I'm a nice, upstanding citizen. Therefore, I deserve a woman for me.
A wife who fits my standard. Did you fall into that trap?
Yeah, I did. I was actually figured that out talking about, stay tuned for more content. When talking about my life story, I just kind of decided to work through that in real time because I'd never really thought about it, but it's really true. I never thought about it until
it
being
wasn't like
forced.
A conscious thought.
Yeah, until being forced to talk about it with my wife and everything. I always just said her name. It makes the marriage almost less special when you view it as, this is a blessing that Jehovah gave me. And this is a special, this is a sacred bond. We made an oath. We signed a contract. So we got to make this work. It's more special, when you realize that you're choosing each other every day. And And thank you for providing me with that context.
So even when that's the start of your relationship, because for my husband and I, that was the start of our relationship. We
same.
We picked each other. We outside of we didn't really take into account witness stuff when we got married. We just really liked each other. And unfortunately, when you're in the organization, regardless of how it starts, once you're married and Jehovah is involved, you start making sure that everything you do in your relationship is up to hit Jehovah's standards instead of up to, instead of making sure
your own imperfect standards.
Instead of making sure that your choices just take into consideration your spouse and whether or not you're picking them, but you're picking Jehovah over your spouse every single day. So super fun. Yeah.
So I don't want to let this slide by the way. It can now be revealed that I talked to you before I finished my domestic abuse video, and got your perspective a little bit. And because I had just mentioned in the Discord, just saying I try and prove me wrong on this, but I can't find anything about marital rape being wrong in any of the publications. And that started a conversation. A lot of people started to say I've actually been told specifically by the elders that it's not grounds for divorce, and including you. And so this experience that you both had with the elders, does that contribute to the waking up process? Because that sounds not good.
I think it's ultimately not the reason why I woke up, but it did contribute to my questioning, because it started to make me question, how can a loving God expect women specifically to endure so much extra suffering? And I'm not saying men don't get abused, but 1 in 6 women will be raped. 1 in 6. And that includes people in the organization. And I don't understand how a loving God could submit any of his creations that he allegedly cares for to that kind of abuse. And then on top of that, add things like the headship arrangement and kind of this infantilization of you can't give talks and you can't teach, and make sure you wear a head covering if you have to say a prayer in front of your baptized son. All of this really, really, personally to me, disrespectful to women policies. I couldn't understand how, I could not reconcile that the organization was backed by Jehovah if that is how we treat women, especially knowing what we do about how women are treated in the world as well. Because, they'll always point to the fact that, women are treated so much worse in the world. They're not. It's about the same. And I'm not saying that's okay, but it's about the same. So, that was really where my doubts started. And it wasn't until I learned more about the doctrine that, the doctrine is what is the thread that unraveled everything. But the fuel is really the, child sexual abuse allegations against the organization, and the fact that women are so mistreated in the organization. Oh, and my friend Mariah Hughes, who had Zalkin as a lawyer and sued the organization successfully. And her rapist is now in jail for 5 years. And he was hurting other people. Huge success story. That happened while I was still in, and I was rooting for her the entire time. She doesn't know that because I was not kind of soft shunning her. I wasn't sure whether or not she was out, and I wasn't going to ask. But she started suing the organization, and everyone in the hall was like, this is terrible. And how could she do this? And I was like, I mean, if you did the crime, you pay the consequences. So, that is really what kickstarted everything, was seeing somebody that I liked and respected, standing up for herself and receiving a lot of terrible responses from those within the witness community. She was standing up for the fact that she was a 13-year-old that got groomed by a 25-year-old man, and how wrong that is. And the organization's response wasn't, we're so sorry that happened to you, but instead, you need to shut up.
Yeah.
And we're going to silence you. And we're going to do everything we can to silence you. That really, really inspired me, because I realized that all of her family was in the organization, and yet and she had just gotten married, and yet she was still willing to lose everything to make sure that nobody else was victimized by that person. And that's still what drives me. So like, that's really what triggered me back in 2015. And then everything that happened to me stacked on top of that. And then watching that Knowing Better video about the doctrine. And I was like, the doctrine was the last thing that was keeping me here. So see ya.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye.
Right. Well, there's nothing left now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to the doctrine, but you mentioned something earlier that I wrote down because I didn't want to forget it. You actually just kind of like mentioned in passing the scripture about winning him over without a word, which is something that is said specifically to women who are married to worldly husbands.
What is the context for that scripture?
Non-believers. Well, that's a good question. Let's look up the context, dear sister.
I don't know what's. Jeez.
I don't remember.
I don't know where that scripture is.
I think it's even so that she may win him over without a word. I think it's in one of Paul's screeds against women.
3:4.
Damn, you were so fast doing that.
I just Googled it. Wives, in the same way, this is the New International Version. Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives.
So I brought that up because this is brought up as specifically something for to win over your unbelieving mate by being just a good witness and by being such a great person that they're like, this person's so amazing that they must have the true religion. What's going on with those Jehovah's Witnesses? But like, I never thought of the silencing power of that verse. Like the without a word thing is literally another verse telling women to shut up.
Maybe it triggered me because I was a woman, but like that, did you never when you heard that scripture, it didn't make you squirm a little bit?
That one never bothered me as much as like actual verses telling women to remain silent.
It didn't. It's just, it's just fascinating.
No, like
I
like
don't
women
often get to hear like the male perspective on the scriptures that drive women crazy.
Oh yeah, no, like that did never bother me, that scripture, like until literally right now when you brought it up. I hadn't even really thought of it, but like I know all the scriptures about women remaining silent. That definitely bothered me that was in the Bible. Like, hey, if we weren't going to actually do that, why'd you put that in there so that I could draw this easy conclusion? But that I never thought of it that way. But all of that builds to there's already a culture of silence and of yielding and waiting on Jehovah that applies to everyone, but that's exacerbated when you're a woman and when that's already kind of your expected role in a relationship and in the religion in general. And
I would argue that it is much more heavy-handedly applied to women.
Sure, yeah.
To the point that I didn't even know that it was ever used on men. Like, did you ever have that used on you? Or the expectation to just kind of shut up and do what you're told?
Yeah, it was never something that was applied to me, but I know that we would use if the husband was a believer and the wife was not, and we were on a shepherding call, you still use that and say this applies to men as well. I meant in general, in general.
Because even when you're not married, the scriptures are still kind of applied to you as a woman. There's men that will take it out of context and try to apply the headship principle over you, even though you could just be a single sister. And we know that especially because the Watchtower acknowledged it and had to have a whole Watchtower article saying if there's a single sister in the congregation, she does not have a male head, period. Her head is Jesus. And the fact that they had distinct that really alludes to the fact that it's a huge problem within the organization with men trying to force women who do not fall under their headship to fall under their headship and lord that over them. And so
I remember, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just took for granted the fact that men probably didn't take those scriptures the same, men probably didn't apply those scriptures to themselves. The ones talking about
not in that. It's the same way, people talk about it the way what is considered I can't think of the right word, but a guy being assertive is a woman being annoying, in the workplace, right? And it's the same way in the congregation where you can have abrasive male elders who are very assertive and are kind of prickly,
one older sister who's a little outspoken
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge problem. So like there's definitely that double standard for sure. But like in talking about this, I do think that even though I bring this up because you mentioned the way that headship had kind of taken your marriage and shaped it into something that it wasn't at the outset. But as you guys tried
Yeah.
to fall into those roles, it kind of turned into something else.
Yeah, and it's funny because it was almost like he had two personalities. There was the person that I knew, and then if things were becoming difficult between us, um, he would try to apply like not the headship principle, but try to be. He described it best. He said that he felt like he acted like the husband in the movie The Wife of Lot, kind of whiny and coercive for everything. Like if I want to go do something and he doesn't want me doing it, like, oh, you know what would Jehovah think?
But honey, have you thought of the scripture where
Yeah, and I think a lot of men and myself see videos like that, especially when you're a witness and you think that husband's being kind and very patient with his wife, but he's being a coercive gaslighter. Like he's being extremely manipulative. And so a lot of husbands, like nice husbands in the organization that aren't like blatantly abusive, do that. And they don't know they're doing it. And we don't know they're doing it because it's just, you're just emulating what you're told to do. And yeah, compared to like in marriage counseling, you know, they really highlight the fact that you are an individual and you are choosing to spend your life with another individual. And you need to respect that you are individuals, and that you're going to make different choices and that they're all not always going to align, and that's okay. Versus Watchtower, which is you're going to want to make different choices, but ultimately the husband decides, woman, you can suck it. Like very different.
Yeah. And that's kind of the entire premise is like Jehovah is always kind of like, if you're yielding as a woman, Jehovah's kind of like, I got you. I know you're right. I know he's wrong. We have an understanding, but like eventually it'll work out.
Yeah, here's how it feels as a woman. You feel like Jehovah's like, look, I know that he's dumb, but you know, I'll fix it. I promise. Just put up with it for now. That's what it feels like. And so you validate it to yourself. You're like, oh no, it's fine. It's not fine. It's bad.
Right. It's amazing how Jehovah's always gonna support my point of view too. Like he's always like, whenever I know something's a problem, he knows it too, and he agrees, and he's gonna sort that out.
Exactly.
Okay, I do want to get into like what is the what brings you from the point where you're like have a lot of these issues and have a lot of independent thoughts to I'm willing to watch a video potentially criticizing Jehovah's Witnesses.
The one thing witnesses are right about is that if you're inactive, you're more likely to be led away by Satan. And I had started getting really involved at work because I had nothing else to do. It was the middle of the pandemic. So I got very obsessed with my job and I wanted to resolve all the toxic work environment problems at work, which meant I was planning incentive stuff and like crocheting a blanket a month to give to people who performed the best, and planning outdoor barbecues because it was COVID. And so I was hanging out with worldly people my age because they were all my age. And although I'd been around worldly people before, never people my age. And they were normal.
What?
I know. Crazy, right?
Isn't that just what Satan wants you to think?
Yes. And one of the people who sat next to me in the office, whenever we talk about religion, because although I didn't preach, I would let everybody know I was a witness because I wanted people to challenge me on it. So that way I could respond to the challenges and reaffirm my faith. Weird, I know.
Nope, that's why the ministry exists, basically.
Yeah, but I wouldn't preach formally, and I'd never talked about it with intent to convert. I would literally talk about everything, disfellowshipping, what it's actually like, how terrible it is. So this now one of my closest friends, he started saying, we'd be talking about it, and he goes, "Oh, is that what your cult tells you?" And I'd get this little stab of guilt one, because I was like, oh, I'm associating with somebody who's calling the witnesses a cult, and two, a stab of guilt because I felt like he was right. And eventually, after spending enough time with these people who were very sympathetic, empathetic, wonderful people, I realized that what was holding me back from leaving was the idea that the witnesses are the only good people in the world, which I never truly believed anyways. But now that I knew without a shadow of a doubt that people on the outside were just as kind and just as warm and unconditional in how much they love you, I lost my incentive to stay. And then that's how I got to the actively, like, being able to watch videos stage, is because I kind of had decided in my heart that I didn't believe it anymore, and I was just in it so that way I didn't lose my family. But I hadn't really woken up yet. Like, it wasn't that I believed it wasn't true. I just was like, well, witness culture is bad. Witness culture is bad. Doctrine's fine, because I never read the doctrine. So that's kind of how I got to that point. Was I figured that at this point my faith couldn't be shaken any further, and I was wrong. I was very wrong. So I watched the Knowing Better video about Jehovah's Witnesses. And for those of you who haven't seen it, please just get past the little awkward skip part and watch it. It's so good. And within like 7 to 11 minutes, I don't remember, 7-11, somewhere between the 7 and the 11-minute mark was probably when I lost my faith, where I was like, it's all fake. It's not real. And it's gross, and they're lying.
Why the Knowing Better video specifically?
I had watched Knowing Better's video on Mormons on my way home from a camping trip back in August. And right after that video, it recommended his video on Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I should watch this. He's not an apostate, but he did completely deconstruct
like
LDS,
Mormonism.
What if he completely destructs my faith and I regret this? Deconstructs my faith and I regret this. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to read the comments, and that'll kind of give me an idea of what the video's like. And I read the comments, and they were like, Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult, and they're murdering children, and a bunch of really extreme stuff that isn't all necessarily wrong, but you've seen how some people comment, both Jehovah's Witnesses and non-Jehovah's Witnesses, about the matter. And some of those commenters are crazy. No offense if you are one of those commenters.
That's right.
But you need to get off the conspiracy theories for a little while. So that scared me away. And then my spouse was showing me these videos about this guy breaking down how he went from being Muslim to not, and or being not Muslim to not. And I turned to him and I said, are you trying to get us to leave? And he said no. And then I kind of pressed him further, and he's like, no, really, I'm not. And then, after listening to those videos, I was like, well, I'm going to watch the Knowing Better video. Because if I can listen to other people deconstruct their faith, and I'm claiming that mine would hold up against it, I need to make sure that's true. And and then it was all over from there immediately, just like 100 to 0. It went from well, I don't believe in the social side of it, but I don't believe in the organization, but I believe that in everything else, to this is all, it's all horseshit.
Yeah.
Real quick. And then there's a point in the Knowing Better video where he says something along the lines of, these people are called faders. And if you're still watching this video, that's you. And he called me out in the middle of the video, and I was like, oh no, I'm done.
Yeah. Yep. He does. He specifically calls out hey, Pimo people, and stuff like that. So that's you had told me this, and so I was paying attention to the first 11 minutes particularly because I wanted to see, and I had to admit, I don't know how any witness could sit through that and think we have the truth.
Yeah.
And it was only all he did is, if you haven't seen it, don't be like me, watch it sooner rather than later. Like, it's just him going through the history of the organization. It's just him talking about, like you would with any religion, like it was founded like this. This is what happened. And it's not critical. It's not mean. It's just him saying what happened, but you just don't know this as a witness.
Yeah, it's more like he's telling people how the religion began from a social studies perspective to random people who don't know who the Jehovah's Witnesses are.
Yes.
So as a witness watching it, you think you're going in, you're going to be like, oh, he's going to be wrong about some things. But then even the Watchtower kind of corroborates some of the things he says. And you're like, no, we don't not believe that. That is something we believe, and maybe we've changed it or we've tweaked it or we view it differently. But that is where we started. And where we started is so gross that you just can't sit through that video and pretend that you didn't watch it and pretend you got nothing out of it, because it is eye-opening. And that's all it took.
Yeah. So what does that feel like? Like, what does it feel like to, over the course of a few minutes, be like, nope, it's all bullshit, I'm done with this?
I was elated for the first 3 days. I was elated. I was like, I knew it. I should have trusted my gut. And now I don't have to pretend anymore. And, all this different stuff. And then the dread hit when I realized that, because around 3 days in is when I read the ARC stuff, the Australian Royal Commission transcripts. And that was the point where I was like, I'm not going to be able to just pretend that I condone any of this. And so I can't have my name associated with the organization. My ideals don't align with theirs. And I also don't want to just go out silently on the matter. I want to speak up. I want to make sure that people know about this, because it's horrific. And I can't do that and be a witness. And it became more important to me to potentially do something that can help other people escape and not become victims, or their children not become victims, than ensuring that my family will still talk to me, because ultimately that's their decision. And although it hurts, I made the better choice.
Yeah. And this all did happen really fast, like over the course of the last few weeks. So
I woke up in January, at the end of January, around January 30th. And then March 14th or February 14th, I had a conversation with my mom, because I thought maybe she didn't believe in it. And I was kind of probing to see, and she got really defensive. And then, asked me if I was struggling. And I said, yeah, I'm having doubts, but I don't want to talk about them. I don't want, you to think I'm an apostate or anything. Because at the time I didn't think I was. And she said, I promise I won't, I'm not going to, even if you were, I'm not going to talk to the elders or anything. I just want to know, I want to be there for you. She accused me of apostasy and called the elders immediately, and called my sisters and called some other family members. And that was it. So I started getting soft shunned. So I felt like I couldn't interact with any friends, because they probably knew about it, because most of my friends were also friends of my sisters. And so I started getting into the XGW community, because I didn't have anybody else. And they were super supportive, and I was surprised. And then I was tired of getting, I kind of had a mental breakdown, because I was tired of getting all those kind of mean texts of people saying like, oh, are you leaving the organization? Because if you leave, I'm not, I can't talk to you, and being very rude. And mostly reaching out to my husband to ask him, because he's the head of the household, and they're scared of me. And I realized I could not mentally handle being soft shunned until eventually all my friends disappeared. So I made an announcement on Facebook on April 5th. I think it was April 5th. So about April 4th, I made an announcement on Facebook announcing that I was disassociating. I had sent in my letter, actually during your live stream.
That's right. Yeah.
I emailed my letter, and I got a response back during your live stream. And he asked if I was willing to meet with the elders. And I said, absolutely not. And then they announced me 2 days later. So from, in January, I was still believing, and now I am fully out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone is shunning me. And a lot of people are very mad at me for posting on Facebook. They think I should have told everyone individually. But if I have more than 400 friends on Facebook who are witnesses, I'm not going to individually message each one or wait
Logistical
to reach out
issue,
to me.
really.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Not to mention, you're just going to accuse me of apostasy anyways. So might as well just do it publicly.
So this is all really fresh, and
Mhm.
I think there's something to be said for like waiting until you've had a lot of perspective to talk about this stuff. But I also think there's something to be said for talking about it right when you're in it, and like really documenting how it feels, or like
Yeah,
in
because
that moment.
not a lot of people document that, because more people are smarter than me and keep their private lives to themselves, and I'm not that
me.
way. And so I like to put myself out there in case someone can relate to it and feel validated in their experience, and so that way people who have the same experience reach out to me and I feel valid. So yeah, I from the get-go got to start documenting it and just writing down what I'm feeling, sharing it with others in the XJW community. And I think that was a really good way to do it. And it's not a way a lot of people do it, but if you can do it that way, having people there to watch your disassociation announcement with you and laugh about it because it was really cringy, or, be there to hug you when your whole family starts cutting you off is very important. And 20 years ago, you weren't going to get that. And now you can. So take advantage of the fact that you can, because, it's helped a lot. So.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. I mean, I think that's one of the main reasons why, like, I think it's so important to talk to like physically and mentally out people and like document that journey, is because it's a really harmful mental space to be in, and it's really scary. And but like knowing that there really are a lot of people on the other side, like there is a support system there, even if you don't know who it is yet. Like there are so many people just willing to like
there's people
listen and
waiting for you.
understand.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are.
There are people just waiting for you. It's hard because that's something that you felt probably is like pretty exclusive to the organization. It's not, and it's better out here.
Yeah,
because they're not waiting for you, so that way they can support you as you conform to mutual ideals that you don't really care about. They are waiting to be there for you at your most authentic self and your most vulnerable self, and they're there to support you.
Yeah, like being there for that journey of self-discovery, that's a completely different kind of support than you get as a Jehovah's Witness, where like you're supported in shedding your old personality and like putting on the new one that we tailor made for you.
Yeah, here you go.
Fresh off the rack.
Yep.
You're supposed to talk kind of weird like this. Watch our videos, you'll understand. Like, do you feel like you've been supported then throughout this process in some way?
Yes, I won't say that it makes it less painful, but it makes it easier to handle. Like it doesn't take away the pain. Getting stabbed, you still feels like getting stabbed, whether there's people there to emotionally support you or not.
Right. It's good to know that there's a hospital nearby, even though like it really sucks to get stabbed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so having that support system and people that are some of them going, in different stages of their apostasy, whether they just left or they were disfellowshipped or they're PMO or they've been out for 20 years, having people at different stages is really, really, really helpful, because you have people that are going through the same thing, that you guys can share your experiences with each other, people who have moved past that point and can help you with the experiences you're currently going through, and people who've been out for 20 years that really give you a hope for the fact that your future is bright and you're going to do amazing things, even without your family and friends that you currently have. You're going to make new connections, and those people who are on the internet that have been out for 20 years are evidence of that, and they will help you through that, and they will reassure you that look at their lives. They're much happier than they ever would have been.
Yeah. And like you get to appreciate that you're told as a witness that there's Jehovah's way of doing things, and then there's the world's way of doing
Oh my
things.
God.
There's a spiritual personality, and then there's Satan's world, but like there is no Satan's personality. There is no like Satan's way of doing things, because people are individuals, and you're gonna be able to encounter like different perspectives and different kinds of people, and like that's really exciting. Just getting to discover what kind of person you are, and
that's a good point, because I mean, since being out, I've talked to more trans people than I've ever talked to in my entire life.
Same.
Like that was a whole world that I knew existed but was on the fringe of my consciousness, and being able to actually get involved in other people's lives in the way that they live them, and without judging and without feeling some kind of pressure to have a moral dilemma over it. I mean, it's nice. You actually get to know people. And like you said, it's very, very powerful to have support from people of all walks of life that have not shed their personalities, because maybe witnesses come from all walks of life, but by the time they get baptized, they have been dehumanized.
Yeah.
Those unique experiences are background stories. They're not told as something that helped shape them as an individual. They're told as something of, oh, this is from my previous life. And it's not helpful.
You're taught that there's like just so much conformity to Satan's world, but like that just isn't the case. And like you meet people who are spiritual, but in a totally different way, or are religious in a totally different way, or are atheists, but not the way that you would think, right? And that's also not to say that like everybody you meet who's an XJW is going to be your best friend or something, but like, or anybody, right? There are people who suck, but there was that in the congregation too, right? Like there were some people that sucked.
Yeah. I mean, you're telling me I woke up 4 days before the Lloyd Evans scandal broke. And so suddenly the entire subreddit, something that I had just made an account for, was just about this man who I had no idea who he was. And everybody was being really nasty to each other. And I'm just trying to like get involved in a community who, you know, I was told was going to be super supportive and everything. And then I was like, what is this? What is this we have here?
I know.
I don't know if I want this. And
I would hate to think of the kind of person that would fuel that fire. I would never want to be that kind of person.
Well, and it's funny because I made a tweet about how my family was going to shun me, and immediately somebody commented, well, something Lloyd Evans, and I was like, you get that off of my Twitter right now. Like, this has nothing to do with Lloyd Evans. I haven't posted a single thing. I do not care about this man. And then like 3 weeks later, I was totally into the drama and had fun. You know, at the time though, it was really like frustrating.
No, that's actually really important. I mean, like, it's important for like two opposing reasons almost to me, which is like that kind of stuff really shouldn't be like on the subreddit, which is a place where people are like looking to connect with other people. Like they did the right thing in making that a mega thread and keeping it confined to one place. At the same time, though, I think it speaks to the fact that like when somebody's ready to leave, when somebody's like made up their mind and like they know it's not the truth, you're not going to scare them back into the religion. Like you're not going to be like, oh, well, I guess witnesses were right, actually, because I saw some yelling on the internet. Like, I think like somebody kind of going through this in good faith is going to realize like, no, I know it's not the truth because it's not true. It's
funny though, because so many witnesses, I mean, not my family because they hate me, but most witnesses reach out to their family to try to convince them to come back. And they're like, you know, you just have to repent and blah, 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 whatever. Or they'll try to intimidate them. And
I got more of that one.
Why do they think that works? The only thing I've gotten was I had one person, or I've had two people message and block me, or it was more like three, but I only really read two of them. And one of them, she said, looks like Satan got another one.
No,
it made me laugh. It was really funny. It was so petty. And then
I'm jealous I didn't get these kind of messages.
You got to post on Facebook.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
There's still some old ladies who don't know that I left. And they're just like, Jake, that ministerial servant.
That's why I wanted to post. I didn't want any ifs, ands, or buts. I didn't want anybody being like, wait a second.
So like you obviously have like no problem talking about this stuff on the internet. You have a channel and you posted an interview. What made you want to do that?
Oh, So interestingly enough, I was going to start a channel to document my experiences trying things that as a witness I never could, like getting a tattoo, voting, stuff like that, and documenting how to do those things and, what those experiences are like for the first time for somebody who had a moral dilemma with it. But I met Mara Fade. That's her online name. And we had been talking in Discord over voice chat, and she's telling me her story. And I was like, I want more people to hear this because I feel like a lot of people have questions for the anointed. And how often do you know anointed people that leave?
Right.
She's the only one I know.
0 times.
And
Yeah.
And so I started, I'm a contributor on a podcast by XGW Caleb. And we were doing our memorial episode, and I said, I know this person who was one of the anointed, and I would love to interview her so that way we could, and we could post it here so that way people know what it was like to be anointed, but also I can, use it for my channel. And so I did that. And then a bunch of people reached out asking for interviews. And I set up another interview with somebody else, and that will be coming out shortly. I already recorded it, but I'll just wait to talk about it. And so now it's turning into an interview channel, which is fine because I really want to highlight people's experiences. I think it's important to have as many experiences out there as we can to ensure that, one, people's stories are getting told, because a lot of people don't even know who Jehovah's Witnesses are, and two, give them a sense of closure, as well as people who've been through similar things. I want people to be able to listen, to relate, or, like me, listen to understand a part of their culture that they didn't understand before, like being one of the anointed. That's a very unique experience. And that is what my channel has become, is interviewing people to highlight progress people are making outside of the organization, as well as their unique experiences within it, considering the restrictive nature of the culture. There's so many unique experiences. Even though we were all following the same rules.
That's a great point. That's like listening to people's stories is I think the best way to actually wake somebody up. If you actually, I don't even know that can happen, but once you drop your phone on the ground and make a loud noise, once you humanize somebody, it's no longer just like a hypothetical problem. And not only is that important for active witnesses to see, but it's important for us to see, because we think that our experience was universal, and it wasn't. So many people have had horrible experiences with this religion, and I had a good one. So it's been good for me to realize, some people just have it really bad from the beginning, and they never have a good time, and they still are in this thing for 50 years.
Yeah. And I think that's difficult for a lot of witnesses who haven't had a hard time to understand too, is to them, they're like, well, the elders aren't like that. I've only had positive experiences with the elders, and the friends aren't like that. I've only had positive experiences with the friends, and the ministry isn't burdened. I've only had pleasant experiences at the door. And it's to them, they attribute that to Jehovah being very present in their lives, which also kind of feeds the narrative that they're doing something right and they're viewed as righteous in Jehovah's eyes, which the brain loves. The brain is greedy and egotistical, and when that type of thing is feeding your ego, and somebody is trying to question your narrative using theirs, you're like, oh, well, you're different, and somehow subconsciously you're going to take their experience, typically, and view it as a merit-based thing, oh, well, clearly, I did something that had more merit. And so the more experiences that are out there, the less people are able to say that, because so many people in the organization think that these experiences are few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
And even though all these experiences are unique and uniquely terrible, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they deserve to be talked about.
Absolutely. Something that kind of hit me, you talked earlier about, not necessarily believing the Bible is real. That's not the right word. Then it's
Sure.
Inspired of God.
Yeah.
You don't believe that the Bible is a real book, right? It's just
I
it's
think
all a hologram.
It's all a hologram.
Yeah, I think so too. So you not only went from like losing your religion really fast, but also seemingly like becoming agnostic, at least really quickly too. What was that like?
Well, when I first realized it wasn't the truth, my instinct was to pray because I was suddenly like very, very sad and very upset. For like a second before the elation set in, I was very sad, very upset. My first instinct was to pray. And then I was like, to who?
Yeah.
And that was crushing to me. And then pretty quickly I came to terms with it and realized that I never really put my faith in God anyways. My faith was always in people, that people can always do better, and people, you know, as a species are improving as we advance, even if we're not at optimal, you know, in our optimal form or whatever, you know, we haven't achieved a lot socially, but we are getting better. And I don't think that that has anything to do with God. I think that has everything to do with people coming together to try harder.
Yeah.
And, you know, so pretty quickly, although for a second, I was very scared to deny that God exists. You know, pretty quickly, I realized that I had always believed more in people anyways. So,
yeah.
You know,
Same. Same. I agree. Good opinion.
pretty good.
We're tied. I did want to follow up on like your marriage. Like, how are things now?
Things are really, really good now. And you know, when I woke up, there's a little bit of a like, well, now that scriptural grounds don't matter, do I want to divorce my husband? Especially because of all the trauma we've been through. Sometimes it is hard to move past that because you can forgive, but some things you can't forget. And then I realized that I don't. And I mean, our marriage got a lot better because suddenly I am making the choice to be in the relationship again. And that was really powerful. So no, our relationship is really good. We're both very much the same person. So the headship arrangement never really worked for us. We're the same person but we disagree with each other all the time. So, you know, it's, yeah, our marriage improved by leaps and bounds the day I woke up. And not to be too personal, but like suddenly like we could have sex again and it wasn't terrible, like, and terrible in the sense of like kind of like a chore and traumatizing.
Yeah.
I didn't feel anxious around him anymore. I think same for him. We could relax finally. We could just be ourselves. We didn't have to act like we're, you know, we didn't have to act like we're trying to be super spiritual people. We could just be ourselves for the first time ever. And yeah, so our relationship really improved a lot.
Jehovah was the third wheel.
Jehovah, you don't need 3 wheels for a bike.
That's right.
So
yeah. God made bikes with 2 wheels for a reason.
Yes.
I don't know. No, I'm really glad to hear that, by the way. And like remarkable that you're able to overcome like a real low point and separation, and all this stuff is frowned upon, like separating, getting therapy, talking about problems.
Yeah, the elders were pretty ambivalent to us seeking out therapy, ironically enough, but I could definitely feel like people in the congregation pulling back, especially after we separated. After we separated, I didn't see anybody for, I want to say 6 months. Partially because of COVID. So I told the elders I was moving out, and they said, okay, well, let us know if you need anything. I didn't, because I don't like to burden people. And I couldn't reach out to friends because I had been instructed not to talk to anyone about it. And I couldn't not talk about it because it happened and it was traumatizing. And so it was also a struggle because I still loved my husband. I was like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to ruin his reputation. And, you know, they're not going to understand, which is true. Nobody's just like, oh yeah, I understand that. No, it's, you know, it's bad. And so, so I didn't reach out to anybody, and no one reached out to me. And I know that, the elders definitely like kind of notified some of the other people in the congregation. And because some people would come up, because this was right before the pandemic, like 3 months before, some people would come up and be like, oh, how are you doing? And then, kind of act weird. And so I think it got around a little bit, even though I didn't say anything. But I was also teary all the time. I was crying every day in the Kingdom Hall. I was crying every day at home. I was a mess. And so nobody was around. So I was alone for 6 months. And then I moved out, and then I continued to be alone because I couldn't invite anybody over because the elders asked me to keep it quiet that I had separated. So I was just alone. People would be like, oh yeah, where's your husband? And it was like, yeah, he's busy at 7:00 on a Friday.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So
what's it like to have like the elders tell you, don't tell anybody about this? Like, what's their reasoning for that?
You don't want to bring reproach upon Jehovah's name or ruin his reputation in the Kingdom Hall, because then what if he wants to reach out for privileges and
also, like your husband, like it could hurt his reputation.
Yes, and therefore by proxy your reputation. But if you know any spiritual sisters, like older spiritual sisters that can keep their mouth shut, basically you could talk to them. And I was like, who? And they were like, oh, I don't know. Well, you can call us. And I did a few times, and it was horrible. And so their instruction was, do not talk to anybody about it, because you don't want to bring reproach upon Jehovah's name or ruin your reputation as a couple.
Yeah, it's really all about optics, isn't it? It's just about how things look to people.
Yeah. Thankfully, my husband was much kinder than the elders, and he told me, don't worry about my reputation. Talk to whoever you need to.
Good.
Because, you know what the elders told me? They said, well, you can rely on him to help you get through this.
Uh-oh. Nope.
And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, you're still married, and clearly, it's up to you to forgive him, but you still have each other to rely on, and you can rely on Jehovah. And I was mad. I didn't express that I was mad because I was weak, but I was mad. Yeah, it was bad. Yeah. It's bad when the person that, like, the perpetrator is kinder to you than the people who are supposed to help you.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah. He was just like, whatever you need, and if you need me to stay away, I'll stay away. And, if you need to talk to friends, don't worry about my reputation. I know what they said. Don't worry about it. You do what you need to do. So it was very frustrating that, it was very conflicting, because one, I was mad at the fact that they weren't very helpful. Two, I was mad that he was trying to be helpful, my spouse. And, then I was mad at myself, because why am I being mad at him for being remorseful? Like, I would tell him sometimes, I was like, I wish you were an asshole so I could be angrier. But he's not. So,
well,
yeah, what are you going to do?
I don't know if you've thought about this, but like, do you think that there's any way that the organization will change, could change in that regard? No, because they don't have a scriptural basis for it. And because they've tied up so much of their culture in religious dogma, they can't change. They can't change it. Other things are a little bit more loose. They could technically allow women to become elders because of Deborah being a female judge, as much as Brother Jackson wants to deny that. But, there's no way that they can change the headship arrangement, because they put too much stock in that letter that Paul wrote. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think it'll change.
I would agree, but I don't know. I was just thinking it's just really weird that a guy wrote a letter a long time ago, and everyone's like, this Paul guy says right here in his letter. He wrote us a letter. Well, he didn't write us a letter. He wrote like
this congregational letter, but we should apply it to us.
Yeah. This is like thousands of years ago. Yeah.
That's like receiving legal counsel from a lawyer because you're suing your neighbor for stealing your barbecue, and then you apply that to everything. Like, oh, hey, somebody murdered a guy. Well, did he have the VIN number? Like,
Yeah.
What? That doesn't make sense. No. If he doesn't have the VIN number, then you can't claim that he was stolen. And you're like, no, a guy got murdered. And
Yeah,
well, as long as
it's
you
a
don't have the VIN
problem.
number.
It's a problem when you can't like ask follow-up questions, like, like, hey, Jesus, you just said to not divorce anybody except like for fornication, but like, what about this? Like, what
Okay,
about that?
well, that makes you Pharisaic.
Yeah, it does.
That's how
They're
the
the kind of people that
Watchtower
would ask
portrays the
questions.
Pharisees. And I know the Pharisees are still bad, but they view it from like, they're like, look at the Pharisees, they question Jesus. But Jesus invited questions. That wasn't the point of that.
Yeah, he asked a lot of questions himself.
Yeah, the point was that the Pharisees were doing it to try to get a one up on him on something spiritual, so that way they could, persecute him. Very different motives.
I wanted to end by asking, just by stealing a question that you asked, I thought was really good in your interview, which you asked, what do you miss the least about being a witness? Like, I don't even know if you've had enough time to miss anything, but like, what are you looking forward to not having to deal with anymore?
I don't have to be nice to sexist men or racist.
Yeah.
I don't have to pretend it's okay. And I don't have to, take their excuses. I can just be like, no, you're racist. I don't have to be like, oh, well, they're a witness and I need to keep the peace. But no. Mm-mm.
But
There's no more
Jehovah
pressure.
drew them to his congregation. He
Yes,
wanted
and,
that
There's
racist.
clearly something that's right about. No, I don't have to do that anymore. And that is the thing that I miss the least, is the expectation that you be permissive of a lot of things to keep the peace.
Yeah.
That's
That kind of goes back to the culture of silence, of just not being able to just call somebody out on something, or not even really being able to like have that opinion, because
I have an opinion. And I think that's what
harboring resentment.
I think what we've learned here is that I just love opinions. I love to have them and I love to give them. And the witnesses don't like that. And that is the reason I left. It's not, but it is definitely the thing I miss the least, is having to. I used to beg Jehovah to give me a spirit of mildness and pray for a spirit of mildness because the elders told me to. And I would do this earnestly.
Yeah.
And now that makes me want to vomit.
I actually think you stumble on something there about like enjoying having opinions and expressing them, and like hearing other people
not feeling
stuff,
guilty
like,
about it.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like, you'll never believe this, but I prayed for humility a lot. Not because I thought I was so great, but like because I was like, I'm being judgy. I'm judging this person for being a weird racist, or for like, I don't know, teaching things that are blatantly not true, or like being judgmental of the governing body or whatever. So I pray for humility, like, remember that you're a dumb idiot who doesn't know anything. You don't know anything.
You just gaslight yourself. My husband's received countless messages from people saying that what I did was haughty, cruel, terrible, mean-spirited, an affront to God. And all I did was say, I don't want to stand by an organization that will not address their issues with child sexual abuse.
How could you say something like that?
Yeah. And a bunch of people thought that was very, very haughty and arrogant. Arrogant was a word thrown around a lot, and aggressive.
Yeah. Well, that's the things that we used to pray for.
Mm-hmm. I try not to think about them.
Yeah, I didn't like thinking about it just then.
Yeah.
Bye. Thoughts. Those are gone now. So where can people find you? You have a channel.
Yes, you can find me on YouTube under the channel name Dax the Scholar, or on Twitter. My Twitter handle, is that the correct word?
Yeah, I think so.
Is Jorn, Jorn Xborg. That was a name before I had an identity. I made that the day I became an apostate and was just like, I just need something.
There you go.
And I think that's it. I'm not really active anywhere else, just Twitter and YouTube.
Podcasts?
Oh, yes. I am in the Babble on the Great podcast. It is a podcast created by XJW Caleb, where we review governing body episodes, releases,
Sure.
and the monthly broadcasts, and talk about JW specific doctrine and cultural things.
It's great. It's Babble On.
Babble
2
on
words.
the Great.
It's
Yes.
a great title. As soon as I
know.
heard it, I
did
was
not
like,
come up with it, but it's
damn it.
fantastic.
very good.
Yeah, and Caleb did the artwork very nicely, so it looks like a tract.
Yeah. And
Fantastic.
that is, yes, that's very good. I when you have a name for a podcast, then you have to do it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
When you come up with something like Babylon the Great, I was like, well,
You're kind
gotta do
of
it.
strong-armed into it.
yeah, you got to do the show.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
When Ben told me it would be called Second School, I was like, well, that's the show. That I don't even know what it is.
That's an
But it's
amazing name for a podcast.
Great,
Second
great
School.
title. Second
I
School.
love that. Second School.
Oh, it's
Wow. I love that.
so good.
That's
Yeah.
super good.
So, guys, you can find me on the Second School podcast. No, thank
When
you
does
for
that-
coming.
When
What's
does your
that?
podcast release?
Oh, tomorrow, actually.
Tomorrow. Where can we
Yeah.
listen to your podcast?
Oh, it's going to be on, it'll be on all the podcast apps
Wherever you
and it'll
get
be
your
on
podcasts.
YouTube on its own channel
Okay.
under that name.
That you
Yes,
just got.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, very good. Do you think we covered everything? Is there notable
There's
gaps?
so much to cover.
I know.
We got a very general, we hit some general points that are important.
I know.
Yeah.
I like everything feels like, oh, I need to follow up on that. And I was like,
No,
okay, well,
you made a 3-hour video on your background. I get it.
well, yeah.
No way.
And,
There's just no way.
and when you have somebody like ask follow-up questions, then you realize like how much you're missing. Like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that before. Mhm.
Interviewing's fun that way.
I love interviewing.
It's fun.
I'm so glad that you're focusing on that
Me
because
too.
there's a lot of those kind of shows, but like none of them are hosted by women ever.
Yeah.
And that just provides such a different perspective, even if it's like you kind of challenging a guy's perspective on something. I don't know. Like it just, it adds a little something.
Yeah, I'm a assertive person. There are a few women that do the same thing. And there are some great creators out there. I wish I could remember her name. One in particular I really like. But it's I couldn't do this without getting to meet so many people within the XGW community that were willing to share their stories with me. And I
Sure.
think that's a very powerful advantage that I have. So
Yeah, for sure.
yep. All right. Well, I gotta run. I'm supposed
Yep.
to be on a live stream. So all right.
All right. Thank you.
What's up?